Cool. So I'm going to be talking about how personas are the most amazing tool you have. No, that's awesome talk about it, actually. And actually, a lot of the themes that she was talking about, I'll be echoing. So it was actually really great to hear. So today we're going to be talking about how to build products people love. So let me introduce myself. So howdy, I'm Tom, and I am a nerd ever since I was a kid. So when I was 13 years old, I was given the important job of babysitting and entertaining my little niece and nephew. I still remember trying two very different approaches. Before one weekend, I decided to make up a cool board game for them. I invented intricate rules, spent an hour cutting up construction paper for board game pieces, and when they came over, I excitedly explained the game. But apparently, 7 and 5-year-olds weren't as excited as I was about playing a board game with 3 dice, graphing paper, and hyperdimensional time travel. That was a really cool concept. My best laid, nerdiest plans were foiled. But on the second weekend, I noticed they were having a lot of fun hiding under my bed sheets, and they were using them to escape from imaginary space monsters they'd come up with that were out to get them. So as they got bored with just hiding under those sheets that didn't do very much, I pointed out that the same old hiding sheets weren't going to stop a vicious monster for long. If they were going to stand a chance, they needed a spaceship. So again, I'm a nerd, I really wanted to do something with space. So we ran to the living room, and I pulled off the couch cushions, and we started building our ship. At first, it just fell apart. Couch cushions aren't very stable. But then we learned what didn't work, and real quick, we just stacked them together differently. In about 10 minutes, we had this living room-sized spaceship. It was awesome. So for a good summer, weekends meant building increasingly elaborate and unstable couch fort spaceships that defied gravity and monsters. Now, my parents were none too pleased about the complete destruction of their living room every weekend, but my niece and nephew loved it. Now, I'm telling you the story not because I'm particularly proud of being both nerdy and messy, but in hindsight, that story embodies the 3 most important ideas I learned applying lean to builds, not couch cushion spaceships, but products that people love. We focus on people's problems, we simplify, and we set ourselves up to iterate quickly. So that's what I'd like to talk to you guys about today. And in case you're worried, I promise I built products other than couch forts. So after my illustrious career in babysitting, I studied computer science at Stanford, designed at the Stanford D School, in business, and then education at the Stanford Graduate Schools of Business, and then education. Still a nerd. I managed innovation stuff at Reuters, built an interactive TV news network there. I love traveling. I really like tropical fruits, apparently. But as a principal at Adobe, I've managed products used by over 1 billion people. And like Jason mentioned, I launched the first product that we ever released using Late Startup at Adobe. It's called Adobe Voice. It's an iPad app, so I'll describe it because I'm going to walk you through a case study of how we built it. So it's an iPad app that lets people make stunning animated explainer videos. So explainer videos are these 2-minute narrated videos you see pretty much on every organization or startup or product's webpage these days. So it's like this 2-minute video, they explain ideas or like who they're trying to help, what the problem is, what the solution is, and usually at the end there's some call to action like download our app or sign up for this or donate to this cause. You see them everywhere because they're effective. People will pay thousands of dollars and spend weeks and weeks to make these videos. So Voice lets people make those engaging explainer videos in about 15 minutes for free. So you just talk to your iPad 1 line at a time, pick images from millions built into the app that describe your ideas, and then Voice sweetens your voice so you sound like you're in an Apple commercial, adds music that fits the feeling of your story, and automatically choreographs cinematic motion graphics. It produces Hollywood-style motion graphics, but these kids can use it. So Apple named Voice their editor's choice and #1 best new app. It also named it one of the best apps of the year. And Jason mentioned this, but David Pogue, who's at the New York Times and at Yahoo Tech Now, described Voice as one of the simplest, most creative, most joyous apps ever written. I never really thought about getting a tattoo before. If I did, might be it. But more importantly, people love it. Swag Central 43 says, yeah, OMG, so rad, used for school projects, so easy, so fun. Best thing since Cool Ranch Doritos. Smile, 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 smile. I like Cool Ranch Doritos, that was a huge compliment. But even though we launched it just last year, Voice has become one of Adobe's most downloaded iPad apps. Millions of people have downloaded it to make incredible video stories, from 6th graders working to keep New York City's rivers clean to the Secretary General's envoy at the United Nations, sharing important stories from all around the world. Voice and its tenants have become the foundation for a whole new product family from Adobe that's coming soon. And it's gone from the scrappy little team to building an organization. We're committing 50 engineers, designers, and managers to developing across the web and mobile devices. So we think of it as a pretty good success story for a lean startup. So I wanted to share some of the early mistakes that we made, though, because we made a lot of them, and practical tips that I learned along the way, as we found product fit and try to build this successful product. So I'm going to focus on the first part of the story, to help you with that scary blank canvas you face when you're starting a new product or project. How do you learn to build a product that people love before you build it? So let's start. Well, first, we focus on people's problems. Here's the truth. Every great product is great at solving a problem for people. So if we want to build a great product, we need to start by figuring out what the problem is. So even if you're a happy, positive person, get fixated on problems and pain, and you'll build better products. Of course, first we got to figure out who are we helping. Unfortunately, in real life, we're usually not given the specific correct target user to go after. Sometimes we get an ill-defined big broad market because we're told by potential funders or executives at our big company that they like those big broad markets. Sometimes we don't have any target user yet because we're just trying to figure out the right market when we're starting. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. For voice, we were asked to create a tool to help regular people create videos and tell stories. That could mean anybody, and that's scary. And all the things that Amanda was warning you guys about personas, those are the scary things that we were facing, this like aggregate mass of people that we would just generalize. That's not a good idea. So we actually did waste some time early on debating and grappling to figure out who that user was supposed to be. Because we thought, well, who should we talk to first? The average user, right? That person that represents that big market, regular people. Like someone who wants to make a video about their vacation in Hawaii, a guy making a video for his girlfriend's birthday, a person sending a funny video to a friend. You've seen the iMovie commercials and things on TV. They give the most representative feedback, surely. Of course, no. Because when we did, it wasn't all that helpful. Because we discovered the worst thing about people. Most people are nice. It's awful. Because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. So if you're conducting a problem interview and looking for a problem, as you should be, and then they don't have notable problems, they'll make some up to please you. They'll exaggerate some annoyances. So you get, yeah, I wish there was something kind of like iMovie, but even easier, and if it just had this one extra feature, that would be great. I would totally use it. Of course, you'll then spend cycles testing and building and solving them, only to find out what so many product teams eventually learn. It's easy to get people to tell you, I'll use that if you build it, but it's almost impossible to get people to start using a new product just to solve a minor annoyance. So there's a better way. Go to the extremes. And this is something we talk a lot about in design thinking and kind of building empathy for people, and it's about getting away from those averages. In the beginning, don't look for average people. Seek out, talk to, observe extreme users. People whose needs are amplified, who have more pressing problems, more constraints than a regular person. They're the people at the edges of the bell curve along some dimension, right? So they might have a lot more experience with X, or have no experience with X at all. Or maybe they have a ton of Y, or unlike most people, they have none of it. You'll often find that their pain is more severe and their workarounds are more notable, which means you're more likely to learn insights about real problems. And often, you can use what you learn from these extreme users to understand the needs of a wider population. So let's get specific. Here's some examples for voice. We want to talk to a group that had much greater than average use of animated videos, so with really high production quality. So startups, right? Like tech startups raising funding. Every tech startup these days seem to have an explainer video on their product page, so we talked to some of that. Another was students and teachers, opposite end of the spectrum. They work on lots of different projects all the time, so it's not just one product video a year. This is like every week, they're working on tons of different projects. They're high frequency creators. And we figured young students, these are all guesses by the way, and teachers in tech-savvy classrooms were much more eager to try out a new app, a new content creation app than the average person. So that could be interesting. And the third, that generated especially valuable learnings, was nonprofits. Basically, this was my strategy. Step 1, talk to nonprofits. Step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 3, profit. Right? When I put that up on the screen, it doesn't maybe look that smart. If we're trying to build a product valuable enough to sell someday, why would we start by talking to nonprofits? It's because the group exaggerated the needs of larger markets. Most nonprofits exist to raise awareness about an idea with a broad audience, i.e., engagingly communicate with a lot of people and get them to do something. Join, sign up, donate, spread a story or idea. Here is this group of customers where their entire reason for being was to tell important stories and spread important ideas. So there's actually a much bigger market that wants to do that, which is also really interesting. Think of every small, medium business out there. Or heck, think of anyone that's ever bought an ad. But nonprofits, they're also extremely resource constrained, which is super useful for our learning. So let me come back to that. Because first, remember what I talked about earlier. We talked about why you can't trust what people say because most people are too gosh darn nice. It's why I'd be hard-pressed to name a single delightful product that was built around requirements from a focus group or a survey. You can't trust what people say, but you can trust what people do. So here's a formula for getting a lot of great learning. High needs plus low resources equals workarounds. When you can observe customers resorting to hacks or workarounds of their own devising, start filling up your research notebooks. Because what people do tells you way more than what people say. So when we conducted problem interviews with extreme users like nonprofits, we learned about all kinds of interesting workarounds that they were doing to stretch these really limited resources. They were doing tons of experimentation with way cheaper ways of reaching a huge audience. Lots of stuff in social media that other people weren't trying yet, stuff in online video. Some of them were asking volunteers to talk to their blurry webcams, usually in a room that was way too dark to make a video. Some of them tried mashing up tools they already had. They had for free, like Keynote or iMovie, to try and make different videos. One of the successful, bigger, but still cash-strapped organizations, they spent thousands of dollars to fly pro bono volunteers that they'd found, like design film school kids, to Haiti to make a 2-minute narrated video about clean cook stoves that they'd been distributing there. That's a major, like $10,000 for a tiny little local nonprofit. That's a major chunk of their annual marketing budget, right? So when you're seeing all the workarounds and hoops that users are jumping through to get an explainer video, we know there's a real problem here. Not hypothetical videos that someone said that would be cool to make someday when they have time and they're retired, but never actually get around to making. For customers like these, the problem of creating an explainer video with limited resources was a valuable problem to solve. Woohoo! So, by finding workarounds from our extreme users, we found a potential real problem to solve. And we even knew what they were doing, which is pretty cool. So, and think about this. We learned about all of this even before our first build in the build, measure, learn cycle, right? And by the way, you can measure how much time I took to do all of this research in days. You're just finding extreme users and asking them about the things that they've already done. Pretty cool. But this is important. We still don't know what to build. It might be tempting to just build a better version of one of those workarounds that one of the extreme users described. But that would be a totally blind guess based on one user. That would help her, but we wouldn't really know if that would help other people until we built it. And that's a pretty expensive way to learn. So this is the most ridiculous clip art I could possibly find. So question mark, how can we synthesize? How can we synthesize our learnings from multiple users to get to first principles about their problems? So whenever you learn about a what, immediately, always ask why. In both design thinking and lean, you're rightly encouraged to act like a child. Keep asking why. So for example, when we were interviewing a customer, they tell us that, we'd ask questions like, they tell us about how much they'd spent on these videos, so like, why were you willing to spend $10,000 on these 2-minute little videos? And we get answers like, well, they're really effective. Like using videos in a campaign last year, we increased our fundraising conversion rate by 20% over other campaigns we used to have that didn't have videos. Like, oh, that's a pretty big deal. And that learning, that why, is something we can ask about with other organizations, other users, other customers. They were giving similar answers. They all told us that videos were really effective at persuading people, getting people to do something, and that drove their bottom line. So now we know why this type of video is so important to this type of customer. So why, just keep in mind that why is your biggest shovel to get to deeper understanding. So let's synthesize what we learned from voice so far. Here's the text from an early draft of the lean canvas I put together for voice, like over a year before we actually released the thing. So customer segments, we were talking about people with limited resources that want to persuade, explain, or inspire audiences effectively online. We had this problem. People had this problem of wanting to create an effective explainer video to persuade people, but it's hard, it's expensive, and it's time consuming. You have to be a great storyteller, you've got to be a great artist, you've got to have visual and audio production design skills. And then here's our value proposition. We would let people publish an engaging, impactful, persuasive video that could be easily shared, just 30 minutes. Now this would actually evolve, but looking back, it's actually awfully close to what we ended up creating that customers would actually love. And this, again, all came before we built anything. And so that's what a focus on problems, real problems, can give you. Really fast learning. So, 2, simplify. So simplicity is about removing the things that don't matter, distractions, leaving time and attention for the things that matter most. In other words, it's about focus. This is one of our most important tenets in building voice. Practice radical simplicity. So, for another way, identify the constraints and do the dumbest thing that might possibly work. In our case, from our problem interviews, people wanted these short videos but didn't have time, money, or skill. So I came up with some ways that we might tackle these problems. But those are all basically guesses. So how do we test it? Right? So we needed to build an MVP, right? So an MVP, by any other name, MVP is an interesting phrase because when most people think about MVP, they think about a product, right? It's literally the last word of minimum viable product. But products are slow and expensive to build. So make it easy for yourself. Test the result, not the product. Remember what you're really, like all those constraints we just learned about, they really describe the video people wanted, we thought people might want. The result, not the actual product. We actually had no idea what UI users would want. And it seems kind of silly to design and build a UI without any data. It takes a lot of work. You'll have endless debates without data. And then you'll probably end up throwing it away when you finally do get it. So instead, fake it before you make it. So for voice, I just made an example of the output we were thinking would work for people. A 2-minute hacked-together video. So I am not a video editor, like can't draw to save my life. I'm not a motion graphics designer or a product guy. But I spent 2 afternoons very badly learning the basics of our pro video editing tools. Then I borrowed or stole the talk track from an amazing existing explainer video from another nonprofit. I replaced their beautiful video footage with a bunch of kind of crappy Creative Commons icons that I found online that I made drop in sync with the narration. So imagine a terrible but mercifully quick and fast-paced PowerPoint that only had icons and text dropping onto the screen with amazing narration that I stole from somebody else. It was awful. But then I showed it to the nonprofits and education customers that we'd been talking to, and they loved it. But they didn't just tell me that they wanted it. I'd asked them for referrals to join the beta program for this non-existent product that would eventually create these videos. And they showed me their interest by paying, in that they gave me the names of all their colleagues. And so I came back with lists of colleagues' email addresses, hopefully they appreciated that, of people they thought would also love the product. So people were willing to give up their friends' privacy to get this thing. That's kind of a good indication that it might actually be interesting. So we'd learned a ton, and we had our first signal of possible product market fit. And keep in mind, you can also do all of this in a few weeks, right, without bothering and taking valuable time from a single engineer. Let them rest. Maybe you could even do it faster than we did. Now, I'm going to be honest. To be clear, I totally cheated, right? So all the successes I was describing to you guys, I was getting all this positive feedback from hand-picked customers that I'd already been talking to. And this is in person, face-to-face. They basically knew me. These were friendlies, right? So I totally stacked all the cards in our favor. We're not going to be selling the product by visiting people door to door and making friends with people. It's going to be hard to get people to actually download a real app or sign up for a real web tool. But that's okay. Always start by cheating. This isn't a game. Remember that you're doing this to gain validated learning, which is an incremental process, and you want to do that as quickly as possible. If our friendlies didn't want that MVP that I showed them, that would have been a pretty strong signal that we were on the wrong track. So that's great, that's good learning. And it's better to learn that sooner rather than later. So always start by cheating. Tell them you learned that at the Lean Startup Conference. It's great. And so we actually did learn that we were wrong. So I mentioned before startups, conveniently left that off. I thought they would be an awesome audience for this tool, right? They'd be excited about quickly creating explainer videos. They wanted nothing to do with that primitive, glorified slideshow that I showed them. And we learned why. Some had hundreds of thousands or millions of VC dollars in their pocket. So they felt they stood to raise millions, or they felt they would raise millions with enough traction. So why would you use a free or cheap, low-cost DIY tool when you could spend tens of thousands of dollars and maybe make millions of dollars? We're not going to compete with that, and that's okay. And in fact, that was awesome, because we're just striking branches off of our decision tree. Early on, we had all kinds of debates about features we could add to make the videos look more professional, but that would have made the process way more complicated and time-consuming, which would have hurt those other users. And now we knew that they wouldn't have moved the needle anyway for these high-end customers like startups. So instead of debating and building and testing, we just saved a ton of time and energy. Another word for this sort of cheating at the beginning, if you don't want to tell people that you're cheating, this is taken from my background in education, call it scaffolding. Sounds a lot nicer than cheating. When you're starting your customer discovery process, you don't have to climb up all on your own. Get help to get learnings faster. And in the end, you'll learn faster. So iteration makes, iterate quickly. Big thinking idea here is iteration makes everything better. So just iterate more. That's why Legos are so wonderful, right? Like, the reason they're fun is because to iterate, if you're trying to build a giant skyscraper, you don't need to have a plan in advance. You can just snap one brick on at a time. If it's wrong, you snap it off and you try something new. Your learning cycle takes about 2 seconds to snap a brick on or off. And that's how you end up building amazing things. So for voice, we got all this positive feedback from in-person meetings, so we escalated. Now I built a validation website. So 6up, elements for basic value propositions, some example videos, sign up for this beta that didn't exist. Now our key metric, activation, changed. It changed from getting a friendly person face-to-face to getting random people on the internet to sign up. We were removing some scaffolding, making it harder for ourselves. And of course, our activation rate dropped. But that's okay, because we can again quickly iterate, refine the value proposition, refine what we're talking about. And all those learnings on that website ended up informing the product that we would eventually design and build. And it's actually, you can check it out, it's still residually up. It's like getginger.co. I'm still not really proud to show it. It looks terrible, but don't be afraid to show things before you're proud. So most importantly, yeah, we took all those learnings and we built this product that would delight people. So yeah, this is it. So this is one of the recent ones I saw. Voice made me a winner, not from a kid, from an adult. Voice made me a winner. My first video got the attention I needed. With practice, my subsequent video got me my new job title of US Media Director for a non-government group, and now I'm literally improving lives with every video we make. We use voice for storyboarding and presentations that win hope and help for the issues that we raise. After talking to all those nonprofits like a year and a half before this, it was really cool to see that happen exactly as we hoped. So it reminds me of how lucky we are to have this great team of passionate people at Adobe. But it also reminds me of how much you can learn when you apply tenets of empathetic design and lean startup, even as one person before anyone has to write any lines of code. Just focus on people's problems, simplify, and iterate quickly. You'll build great things that people love. I'm Tom Nguyen, product is Adobe Voice, and if you want the slides, just drop me a note at TomNG on Twitter. It's been awesome chatting with you guys, and I hope this has been valuable for you. Thank you.
All right, we thought that given the threads that I think were obvious woven across your presentations, it would be good to have a little conversation. The real thread is that you hate people and you want us all to cheat. So there's a deep, clear moral center to your presentation.
We're all good people. It's good to Vegas after this.
That's right. Exactly.
What do you got for these
We're all going to
guys?
Vegas this weekend.
What are you thinking about for their presentations? What would you like to talk about?
We don't fight.
Yes, sir.
Tom, how come you didn't use voice for this presentation?
Oh, actually, great question. So voice is actually designed to, one of the things that we were talking about is there are a lot of tools to help people reach people inside of a room, PowerPoint, Prezi, Keynote. but there aren't that many if you want to reach the millions of people outside of a room. And so voice is laser focused on doing that for a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I feel like when you're talking about personas, and I totally get what you're getting at, but I feel like personas are really meant to be a filter and less filter for your solution, not necessarily a tool for problem development. I think that's sort of the direction you're coming from. And I know that you were talking about how do we sort of get to the point where we can get at the solution quickly. What I didn't hear, and I want to hear what you guys have to say, is how are you define? Because in both cases you've already come up with a problem, and now it's how do you create a better solution? What are your ways of actually finding that problem?
Oh yeah, sure. So in terms of finding problems, I think a big part of it is that's a lot of the learning you get from those extreme users that I was mentioning. Is that again, look for actions. It's hard to, when you ask people for problems, it's really easy to make up one. But when you see them doing a hack for something, there's clearly a problem there. So I think that's a great starting point. Look for those actions and observe people, don't just ask.
To me, problem discovery, I think comes from just living. I think my personal bias is you find problems that you have. There are many, whether that's finding a job or giving a presentation or what to do on a weekend. I liked how you talked about realizing more about the pains and the problems in your life and not being so nice. It can get really depressing, but I carry a notebook around with me where I write down every problem or most problems that I come across. It gets depressing, but I think the reality is there are many problems out there, and figuring out which one resonates and where that actually is a painful problem is part of what we do. But I would say that starting with a problem has to come from the heart and has to come from something you're passionate about solving, and from there figuring out how to solve that problem is the challenge.
Yes, sir.
Amanda, I would like to ask you, you said that you don't have a mobile website because it's for last minute booking, but actually to download an app, it might take longer than to just book through a website if you are a first time user.
So we do have a mobile website. We don't have a desktop website. So we, because all of the problem we're solving is last minute bookings, and so the situation and the emotion that we think about is where are you either Saturday morning sitting on your couch, which happens in my house, you get off the plane at JFK or wherever it is and you need to find a hotel room. In none of those situations are you let me get out my laptop, connect to Wi-Fi, and figure out where to stay. So we are mobile, but it's app only and mobile web only. We don't sell on desktop.
Yes, ma'am.
So I really love the story of people booking on the way to Las Vegas, and you can see that on your map. So I'm wondering if there's a way that do you have tools or methods for discovering how people are using your product in ways you didn't anticipate at first? And is that data? Is it going back and talking to more people? How do you make a feature roadmap from that?
So that's a great question. So in terms of how we get feedback from our users, we are blessed by getting overwhelming feedback, and we listen. So we do Net Promoter surveys, which give a ton of feedback. We ask a sampling of bookers every single day. We read our app reviews. I read our app reviews religiously. We have a feedback button in the app, and we probably get over 150 emails a day that I read. So we're constantly getting feedback. Many of those are complaints. And then we actually do interview users every other week. We line up 8 to 10 users for about a half hour, 45 minutes, just to understand what's going on. And then there's data. The Vegas thing, no one would have ever admitted to, but you can see the data when we drop the prices in Vegas. It literally lights up with you. We just use a hack on the Google Maps tool to plot the booking location, the lat long of where the booking transaction happened, and you can watch it fill up, and it's terrifying. Go Vegas. A lot of people are.
Yes, sir.
Tom, can you talk a little bit about the extremes with the schools and the kids? What were some of the hacks and how did you validate the idea with them?
Yeah, so in the school context, actually, so related to that question also of trying to find problems that people have, one of the school context ones is interesting because people, so there's this awesome teacher, Jeff Larson, who's actually teaches at a high school here in San Francisco. And we go over and interview and talk to him in his contacts. We made a point of not just asking him to come over to Adobe's offices and go behind some one-way mirror room, just to see the context that he was in. And so as I was asking him questions about, what constraints, blah, 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 what I'd noticed is that this is in between class periods. And like in between every question I would ask him, another kid, one of his students from another random period, would come up to him, like tug on his shoulder and like, Mr. Larson, I have a question about this, and another question about this. And literally he never had more than 30 seconds free to do anything. He was like juggling questions from like 15 kids all at once in between class periods. He never told us like, oh my God, like I have no time to do anything. He was like, oh, like really peppy and positive. But watching his context, like you could quickly see how important it was that whatever we were proposing would take a very short amount of time. Right? And you would ask him, and he's like, oh yeah, I'd spend like a few hours learning a new tool, but like you see him in his context, in the super rich context of having millions asking questions all the time. And you can tell this constraint of like not having time was a huge one. And that ended up shaping a lot of the design decisions that we made, like cutting out features and dropping things and simplifying things to address that kind of unspoken but seen need.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for sharing insights. So I wonder, once you identify one problem for a set of users or use cases, how would you scale that to a broader audience or larger number of users? Would you find other problems, build other products for other users, or kind of grow the product to get more problems for more users?
So I think you have to grow your product, right? So that's a choice on product strategy about how you want to grow. So when we think about our use case, and I'll pick on my own example around weekend getaways, until I feel like we've dominated all of those cases where we can actually do weekend getaways or there's nothing to do this weekend, we'll try not to take on a new challenge until we've actually kind of captured what we think is like a decent share of the market. But then of course the next flavor of it is how do we deal with emergency situations, which I think we've already tackled in the product, but I can think about other situations where we can think about favoriting hotels and different ways of tracking markets, and even if I think about personalization and how we can send you rates that will actually shift your behavior and get you to stay out, even though you never even intended to stay out. So it's not, we need something to do this weekend, but like, how can you compel me to stay? Those are all new use cases we're starting to think about, but we really try to focus on solving one problem with 2 or 3 different features so that it's kind of thematic, and kind of that's what our roadmap is solving one problem at a time.
Yeah. And along those lines, we tend to look for, as we think about expansion, we think about the one offsets, so like similar markets that are just a little bit different. Right? So I'm spending a lot of time talking at nonprofits. Small, medium businesses are very similar. They have the same goals of getting people to convert to do X, Y, or Z, sign up, buy this, instead of donate to that. Just small differences, like they have more resources. And so most of the other variables are pretty similar. Instead of resetting all the variables and starting from scratch, you can kind of build on a lot of learnings that you have from other audiences and extrapolate if you look for these like one-off offsets. And that's a nice way to go.
Yes, sir.
What was the first non-cheating prototype that you built?
Yeah, so the non-cheating.
How did that go about? So did you pitch the board or?
Yeah. So actually we had like just from the examples that we had in the validation website, like that was enough. So this kind of related to like how do you do lean startup inside of a big company, and like how do you convince people, like especially when it's new. What was nice is like we were getting kind of real traction that like we had like incredible like sign up rates for this like non-existent beta. At the same time, like I was lucky enough that like we have amazing, super smart engineers at Adobe that were in parallel starting to build like the infrastructure for how we would create this thing. Like the whole, so actually building the whole tool was actually really complicated. Another kind of technique we applied was like breaking problems down into smaller little building blocks. So I mentioned like I cheated by stealing the talk track and narration that was professionally done from a nonprofit video. I feel guilty about that. We had to figure out like how do we actually help people do just that, like ignore all the video part. Like we had to figure out how to make people sound like they were in an Apple commercial. So we did a little spin-off prototype with like super smart engineers spending like a week of their time. I asked them to build like, what if we had some touch recording UI that was nothing but like a voice recording tool that had like a walkie-talkie style UI and let you play music in the background. And we showed just that to our customers. And they're like, oh, this is great. I could like match this up with like my iMovie or my Premiere or whatever, and like this is a better way of recording video. So we're actually taking this like big problem of how do you build a super complicated tool and breaking it down to smaller pieces that we can independently validate and iterate on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Tom, it's interesting that you did this inside of a bigger company, and I'm curious to see how much information was flowing up to leadership, and what was their response to this whole process, and is it something that they're actually used to?
Yeah, so we've been really lucky in that like Adobe's management has been like even when Lean was new, like our execs are super supportive of trying new development approaches. It's like a 33-year-old company, and our flagship product like Photoshop is like 25 years old this year. But we're always looking for new ways to do things better. So at the beginning, it was kind of giving these updates. What we found was most effective actually was telling stories, right? Like we can give like little data points, but all the data points we give for like these scrappy little Lean projects is so small in the scheme of things. Like, oh, we're excited we got 100 beta pre-release users. It's like, Photoshop has 10 million or billion or whatever. Like those numbers aren't that interesting, but the stories were. So when we were talking to the board, we were presenting the context of like a specific organization. Actually, it's based in SF. It's called Groundworks Opportunities, and they're a nonprofit that's using these videos. And like actually having their volunteers make fundraising videos to support building water wells in Uganda. And they were finding out that they would get they were 8 times more likely to hit their fundraising goals. So it's one of these videos that was made in our prototype tool than they had with anything else. So when you tell that story of like a person and a context, a real person and a real context, it's pretty convincing, even for boards.
It went up to the board.
Yeah.
Couple minutes left. Yes, sir.
Can you talk more a little about those emotional pieces to both of your approaches and how you take, when you find a certain emotion or like boredom, for example, how do you take that and then say, okay, we want to solve this problem of just boredom to get them to the point where they're actually choosing your product, sort of start the road to solving the boredom if that's the emotion. But
Yeah, so that I plagiarize everything. So Nir Ayal, I think, is Nir and Far is the name of the blog, N-I-R and Far. I don't know if you guys have read his book. It's called Hooked, I think. And he talks about building relationships so that you attach an emotion to the click whirl and how you train users. So that's what I would point to. I don't have anything original or creative in that, and it's a very hard challenge to have someone come up with an emotional reaction and then fall to your product as a solution. And to be candid, that wasn't something we came up with on our own. To the question earlier about people's feedback, we occasionally, 2 years ago I remember, or a year and a half ago, I got an email from a woman who was like, I just love Hotel Tonight. When I am bored in the grocery store line, I just open the app and think about where I could be. And I thought, well, that's weird. I thought I was the only one who did that. But I think you get those insights from the users, and then building that association is a lot about that hooked work, which is awesome.
And similarly, it's a good place to learn is just learning by analogy. So that problem with boredom, like we actually, especially when we started focusing on like younger, not focusing, but like adding younger audiences and like kids in school to kind of the customers we were targeting, like fun was a big element. Like how do you make this thing fun? And so instead of just trying to like do everything from scratch, we're also like stealing and borrowing from others. The analogy, like we look at toys, right? So we look like you're watching kids play with, I mentioned Legos, right? And like why can a kid just like sit there and get in the flow, like sitting in a living room playing with Legos for like an hour? And one of the big things is like, because each iterative step is so short, right? And it's kind of a little meta because like Lean is a lot about like shortening those cycles. But it's fun when you don't have to think and plan in advance and you can just do things one block at a time. So in voice, instead of having like a giant massive timeline where people kind of edit things, like we just broke things down into little pages, like a few seconds at a time. You literally say 1 sentence at a time. And if you messed up that sentence, you'd like re-record it. And so in practice, we'd test these ideas, and we'd have like literally see an 8-year-old, she'd record like the same thing, like once upon a time, once upon a time, once upon a time, like with more energy, like 10 times until she got like the perfect take, because it had this walkie-talkie UI. Because she was able to iterate so quickly, when she played that all together and stitched it together, like she sounded like Obama. It was like this awesome. So yeah, so learn by analogy and take ideas from other places.
We're out of time, but these two are sticking around, so you can come up and then ask some questions afterwards. Thank you for your participation. One of the best things about Lean Startup Conference is that the people who program this conference don't just pick people who have done interesting things, they pick interesting people. So afterwards, come up and ask Tom about freediving, and ask Amanda about the day at work she only let her employees communicate by Snapchat.
The whole company only communicated via Snapchat.
Got it. All right, thank you guys for participating. Come up and ask them questions.